Rolling Stone! Rolling Stone!
The fifth generation of video game consoles was the first step towards making 3D graphics in home video games mainstream. Of course, that means a whole new type of input. The N64 came as standard with an analog stick, the PlayStation got gifted the DualSense and then the DualShock later on, and the Saturn got, this? Now, you don't see the Saturn's 3D control pad that often these days, not unless you've been reading up on Nights into Dreams, which the controller often came bundled with. When you see anyone playing the Saturn, it's almost always with the Saturn's standard controller. So what's the beef with this one? And is it worth getting? Hello fellow gamers, and we're going to take a look at the Saturn 3D control pad. Now, you may have noticed something a little off with my controller. You were probably expecting me to have the black one. That's the one that we all got in the UK. And of course, whenever I get new controllers, I tend to just go with the ones that release in this country. Though there are some exceptions. And it's the same with this. I was in the market for a Saturn 3D control pad, but when I was looking them all up, this Japanese import one, it was only a $5 more than the standard black one. It's very different to what we normally get here, so you can bet that I would opt for one of those instead. It's coloured to match the white Japanese Saturn, though this one is showing its age a little bit. It's a bit off-white and the connector is very yellow, which I might try and retrobite at a later date. This one even has the same coloured buttons as the standard controllers in Japan. But other than the colour scheme, it's exactly the same as the ones we've got here. It's just funkier. So let's delve into this a little bit further. SEGA was clearly going with a circular motif with this controller. The joystick, the D-pad, all of the buttons, even the controller itself is very circular. What offsets that are the two large handles on the back, which makes the controller easier to hold. On top of which are two analog triggers. Most of the controllers we use today have analog triggers. They have done for years, and we just take them for granted now. Whereas back then, this was something new. This was probably the first official controller ever released to include them. It likely started here. The other obvious new addition here, of course, is the 3D directional pad. At least that's what SEGA calls it anyway. It's quite different from the other analog controllers of the same generation. Whereas those offered by Nintendo and Sony were clearly joysticks, this instead uses, well, what I can only describe as a disc sitting atop a dome. As you move it in all directions, it doesn't sway like the others do, more like it glides in all directions. It's almost like a cross between a regular analog thumbstick and the circle pad that you find on a 3DS. As different as it may be, the way it's been designed, the movement is very smooth, it's very well positioned for your thumb when the controller is in your hands, and it's much easier to use for long periods over the D-pad. Speaking of which, the controller includes the same D-pad as the regular controller, as well as the same 6-button layout. Something that's of note here as well is that none of the main face buttons are concaved, like they are with the regular controller. With your standard one, A, B and C are concaved, whereas X, Y and Z are not, but all of them aren't concaved on this one. I'm not sure why SEGA decided to do that. Something else that threw me off with this controller is how the lead can be detached from the main body of the controller, revealing a unique connector inside. After reading up on it though, I learnt that SEGA planned to expand on this controller using this connector. It was going to work similarly to the port on the back of the N64 controller to allow for interchangeable extensions such as memory cards, motion control, rumble packs and even wireless connectivity, amongst others. It's likely none of these came to light though, purely because of the Saturn's dwindling player base. Anyway, getting back to the rest of the controller, there is a big red start button close to the bottom, and underneath that there is a switch to change between the digital and analog controls. Now, you may be asking yourself, why on earth has it got that? Well, actually it's pretty simple. Since the 3D control pad came out like part way through the Saturn's life, obviously not all of the games that came out before it are going to recognise that analog input. So you need the option to be able to change back to the digital input and make it into a standard controller. Now, of course, that is something that I should have really checked up on before I got this, and that was, well, how many games have I got that will actually support this controller to its fullest? After checking my small library against the list of supported games, it turns out that I actually have 3 games that support it. Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition, Sonic Jam, and Sonic R. So you know what? Let's check out this controller on these supported games and just see how it fares. So let's check the first one, Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition. And in fact, I hadn't noticed this before, it's even got the little symbol on the back of the case to indicate that it supports this controller. Now, the first thing I noticed with this was the changeover to how you accelerate and brake. On the normal controller, you'd be using the face buttons like B to accelerate. However, with the 3D control pad, you use the shoulder triggers instead, pretty much like you would do in most racing games today. Something else I found when using this was that the analog was very sensitive with this game. The tiniest little twitch, either left or right, will have you turning so much that you'll have changed lanes by the time you try and compensate. So you're going to need to be quite careful when you're turning. It's only on hard corners where you're going to need to press left or right all the way. It definitely felt better in my hands to play though, overall, compared to the original 2nd gen controller that I've got. It's going to take me a while to get used to those really sensitive analog controls. Well, the next game we're going to try is Sonic Jam, and, well, it's Sonic Jam. You're just playing Sonic's Mega Drive games, so using the D-pad on the original controller is pretty spot on here. Same applies to the 3D control pad as well, the D-pad is no different. However, analog comes into its own in the Sonic World Hub. Now previously, with the original controller, Sonic would move in whatever direction you choose, and he'll pick up speed until he's running at full pelt. Changing directions was quite jarring as well, as Sonic snaps into 8 different axes when he's turning around. But using the analog on this controller though, it is more akin to Super Mario 64. Which, well, I suppose it's unsurprising since Sonic Jam released not long after Super Mario 64 did. And it was through this that I really noticed that Sonic has 3 different movement speeds. Tilting the 3D pad slightly makes him walk, then a little further makes him jog, but pushing all of the way makes him run straight away. And having those analog controls, it really does transform how Sonic controls in this hub world. And having those shoulder triggers to turn the camera around, it really makes it feel more like a demo or a proof of concept for Sonic Adventure. So if Sega had gone ahead and released Sonic Extreme on the Saturn and they made it fully compatible with this controller, I think they may have had something special on their hands. Back to the Mega Drive games though, in those, Sonic controls no different than before. You can control Sonic, or Tails, or Knuckles, with the 3D stick, but the game only recognises the digital input, so slightly touching the stick in one way will have him just moving at his normal rate. And to be fair, you're probably not going to want to play these games with the analog controls anyway, as there's all that extra travel that's introduced. But hey, there's nothing stopping you from just flicking the switch and going to the D-pad. Now last but not least is Sonic R. Now I have played Sonic R with an analog stick before. This is when I played it on the GameCube's Sonic Gems collection, and it worked really well on there. However, on the Saturn, I'm not quite so sure. I mean, absolutely, it recognises the analog input from the controller, and it turns your racer anywhere from a little bit to full pelt, depending on how much you're tilting. However though, it feels like there was some sort of delay when I was trying to turn using the analog stick on this title. I was still finding myself turning, well, what I felt anyway, was way too early to get around corners, or I'd simply just crash into the sides quite a lot. Switching over to the D-pad had me controlling the character better, as I think it's just applying full pelt when you're pressing in either direction. So is Sonic R? Yeah, the controller is comfortable and the analog is appreciated, but it's a little hit and miss. So since I only had 3 games that supported the 3D control pad, I decided to try this out with a couple of quote-unquote unsupported games. And you know what? The results were a little surprising. the first unsupported title I tried was SEGA Rally. Now when I was using the 3D control pad, it seemed to make SEGA Rally think that I was using a steering wheel. It was coming up with steering wheel references whenever I was going through the menu. And this was very noticeable when I was trying to select a car, as I had to hold the thumbstick in the direction in order to select different ones. Letting go of the joystick defaulted to the SEGA automatic, whereas before you'd just use the D-pad and just move through the menu as normal. Playing the game though, control-wise, it felt much the same as using a D-pad. It didn't seem to recognise the analog inputs, so the cars don't turn slowly when turning gently, but it was much easier on my thumb in the long run. Instead of jamming left and right on a D-pad, which would get sore after a while, the thumbstick just glides from side to side. Something else I noticed when using this controller was that the buttons had changed configuration as well. Instead of using A or C for braking, Y was the brake button instead. I really liked this change, as it meant that I could easily just tap the brakes with the tip of my thumb whenever I needed to, rather than have to shift the weight of my thumb to either side in order to press the brakes. Another unsupported title I tried was Panzer Dragoon. Now using the 3D control pad sounds like it would make a lot of sense with a railgun game like Panzer Dragoon, especially since it's a title that supports the Virtua Stick. However, like with SEGA Rally, the game came out long before the controller, so we can't expect perfect compatibility. Now one thing I noticed when I was using 3D mode was that the reticle or my aim would centre right to the middle of the screen when I'm not moving the joystick. So essentially you're turning the 3D pad basically to aim in the actual positions on the screen. When you aim to the top right on the pad, you are aiming to the top right of the screen. Now I didn't mind this much, except the range that's given to you is actually just a very small area. It's a very small circle which encompasses only about maybe 3/4 of the actual screen. Now this led to quite a bit of troubles when enemies or projectiles were coming my way, and I simply couldn't reach them because they were outside the reach of my controller. They were simply outside of the reach of my reticle. So yeah, using the 3D control pad does change it slightly. I think it is recognising it as a Virtua Stick, but I wouldn't recommend it really. So, is this controller worth getting? Well, I'm not going to waste your time here. In short, it's a very nice display piece and it is comfortable to use with the games that support it. But considering that there are so few games on the Saturn that support this, your return on investment is going to be pretty low. I mean, for the price that this typically goes for, you could get like 4 regular controllers for the cost of one of these. However though, if you do find one for cheap and you've got the games already that support it, it's really only then that I would suggest picking one up. Otherwise, you're just going to want to give this a miss. But with that, I'm going to sign off, so thanks very much for watching. If you've tried one of these controllers, let everyone know your thoughts on it in the comments down below. And hey, while you're down there, please leave a like if you like the video, and there's always that subscribe button if you want to see more. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.